现在很多朋友都走了。
A lot of my friends have left. Ever since the pandemic started and ended, so many foreigners have gone. And then those foreigners didn't come back. On top of that, new foreigners aren't coming either. I'm not saying there are absolutely none, but it feels like the numbers have dropped a lot. At least here in Beijing, I'm part of many groups of foreigners, and I've noticed the groups are so much smaller. These groups used to have 300 or 400 people, but now barely anyone is talking. Most have left. I don't even know why they're leaving. It's not looking good.
老外街，上
This is Shanghai's Foreigner Street. It used to be so vibrant, full of lights and crowds. Now all the foreigners are gone. You can't see a single one. And this is a weekend. On a Saturday night, the Foreigner Street is completely empty.
This next clip is from a Korean tourist vlog in China. Two Chinese people warmly said that they like Korean friends, but when they mentioned Japanese people, they weren't so nice. They said they would beat them up on sight. With this kind of hospitality, which Japanese person would dare visit China? Are these two nationalist undercover agents sent to tarnish China's image? They're scaring off all the tourists. At Shanghai Pudong Airport, you can barely see any foreigners now.
上海浦东机场
Look at the commercial situation at Shanghai Pudong Airport. It's so bleak. You can't find a single place to eat. Most places are just people resting or sleeping. There's one souvenir shop, Taste of Shanghai, still open, but the bar next door is closed. The jewelry store here has been closed for a long time too. Besides this, there's almost nothing except restrooms. Everything else is shuttered. It used to be full of foreigners, making it feel like an international airport. Now the entire airport is empty and desolate. Where have all the foreigners gone?
外国人正在疯狂离开中国。
Foreigners are leaving China in droves. Can you still see any around you? Here's some data to share. The number of foreigners living long-term in China is dropping dramatically. Over the past decade, the French population in China has decreased by 40%, Americans by 23%, Germans by 22%, South Koreans by 51%, and Japanese by 44%. Take Shanghai, China's most international city. In 2011, it had 200,000 foreigners. By 2021, it was down to just 163,000. In Wanjing, Beijing's largest Korean community, there used to be hundreds of thousands of Korean residents. Now there are only about 20,000 left. Across all of China, foreigners make up just 0.05% of the population. That's a smaller proportion than in Laos or Cambodia, let alone Japan or South Korea.
The Chinese government is clearly worried now. Why did all these foreigners leave after the pandemic and never come back? Tourists aren't coming, business people aren't coming, and international students aren't coming. This means not only a loss of money, but also a loss of high-tech talent. In response, Beijing is making major moves, including relaxing and improving its visa-free transit policies. According to official media, China's National Immigration Administration announced on December 17th that it would significantly extend visa-free transit policies. Previously, foreigners from 54 countries, including Russia, Brazil, the UK, the US, and Canada, could stay in China visa-free for 72 or 144 hours during transit. Now that period has been extended to 240 hours, 10 days. The policy also extends to 21 additional ports of entry. Under the new rules, eligible travelers from these 54 countries can transit through China to a third country and stay in designated areas for up to 240 hours. The number of provinces and regions covered has also increased from 19 to 24. For example, travelers in transit can now move freely through the entire provinces of Anhui, Hainan, and Guizhou, as well as designated cities in Shanxi and Jiangxi provinces. In Fujian, Hubei, and Shanxi, transit travelers can now explore the entire province, and the same applies to the Guangxi region. In the past, these 54 countries, covering much of Europe as well as Russia, Brazil, the US, Japan, South Korea, and the UAE, could transit through China for 3 to 6 days without a visa. Now the period is extended to 10 days, and 38 of these countries have already been granted 30-day visa-free entry in the past year. Despite the end of pandemic restrictions, China's exchange with the world hasn't resumed post-pandemic levels. Facing slow economic growth and weak consumer spending, Beijing is trying to attract more tourists and business people. Since last December, China has unilaterally offered visa-free entry to several European countries, including Germany, France, Italy, and the Netherlands. Starting July 1st, the policy expanded to New Zealand and Australia. Now, 54 countries enjoy 144-hour visa-free transit in China. For American tourists, visa application processes have also been simplified. The data from China's National Immigration Administration shows that these new visa-free policies have had limited results. From January to July 2024, China hosted over 17.25 million foreign tourists. However, back in 2019, that number was 97.7 million. In contrast, Japan has been seeing over 3 million international tourists every month since March. From January to June 2024, Japan welcomed 17.8 million international visitors, a record high. Meanwhile, South Korea received 7.7 million foreign tourists in the first half of the year, nearly back to 2019 levels. Why has China's efforts to attract foreign tourists failed? It's not because China's scenery isn't attractive. The real issue lies in policies like the national security law and anti-espionage law, coupled with long-term government rhetoric that fuels anti-foreigner sentiment. This has made many foreigners feel unsafe traveling to China. Incidents like the recent attacks on an American teacher and a Japanese resident have further heightened fears among potential visitors. The Wall Street Journal reported on an unsettling incident where 9 police officers visited an American business executive's Beijing home one evening, demanding to check his passport and verify his employer. One officer recorded the interaction on a smartphone without explanation, leaving the executive feeling deeply uneasy. He remarked, "It will take a long time to rebuild the trust that's been broken in recent years." Cameron Johnson, a supply chain consultant in Shanghai, pointed out that foreigners with families who want to grow their careers are increasingly choosing Southeast Asia, India, or the Middle East instead of China. Sean Stein, a senior advisor at Covington & Burling's Public Policy Division, noted that foreign companies and executives used to enthusiastically head to China. Now, they don't see any benefit in doing so. Unless these issues are fundamentally addressed, even further loosening of visa policies won't attract any foreign tourists. Who would go to a country where they don't feel safe? In response to the visa changes for 54 countries, China's media has been busy promoting the news. Suddenly, Chinese short video platforms are flooded with posts by South Koreans. Videos with titles like "South Koreans working regular hours and relaxing in Shanghai on weekends" have popped up everywhere. Some posts even claim that half the evening diners at Shanghai Haidilao are South Korean. The narrative feels all too familiar. It's clearly aimed at luring South Korean tourists. Gone are the days of anti-Korean sentiment and boycotts of brands like Lot. Now, China seems eager to open its arms and turn enemies into friends. But there's one unspoken rule. Foreign tourists visiting China must never criticize the country, or they'll be attacked online. For example, a Korean travel vlogger named Aosi recently visited China after hearing about the visa-free policies. He shared some inconveniences he faced during his trip, only to be met with a massive backlash from Chinese netizens. Ironically, many South Koreans hadn't heard of this vlogger until the Chinese outrage made him famous overnight. Aosi's videos are actually well done and detailed. He lived in China 15 years ago and knows the country reasonably well. This time, he returned to see if the recent wave of foreign praise for China, coupled with the streamlined visa process, held up in reality. His videos not only highlight tourist attractions, but also touch on real social issues. As we all know, China's economy is struggling right now. Many people are unemployed, and the high cost of living means lots of men can't afford to date, marry, or start families. When Aosi brought this up in his videos, Chinese netizens accused him of bad-mouthing China. The message from nationalists was clear. Our unemployment and economic problems are our family matters. You, as a foreigner, have no right to talk about them. Don't embarrass us in front of the world. Aosi continued his series, and in the first episode, he openly stated, "I'm fortunate to have been born in South Korea. Life for young people in urban China is far harder than I imagined." That single comment shattered the pride of many nationalist viewers. Some Chinese bloggers accused him of arrogance and prejudice, echoing the tone of state propaganda. But let's be honest, are young Chinese people really living carefree lives? Are they not facing unemployment, layoffs, and the pressures of buying homes, getting married, and raising children? Aosi also mentioned that online payments are very inconvenient for foreigners. This is because foreign online payment systems can't be used in China, and many places only accept WeChat Pay and Alipay. Without these, it's almost impossible to live a normal life. His first stop was Kunming, Yunnan, and his second stop was Chongqing. He had heard that Jiefangbai in Chongqing was full of foreigners, but after walking around twice, he didn't see a single one. He also pointed out that when foreigners come to China, they are forced to install a bunch of apps to make life more convenient. However, they dislike these apps because they invade their privacy. Furthermore, surveillance cameras are everywhere, making Aosi feel as if he's constantly being monitored. Aosi also said that what he feared most eventually happened. His credit card was fraudulently charged. This outcome alarmed many Korean netizens, who found it terrifying. They left comments such as, "The scenery may be beautiful, but if I have to risk my privacy being stolen to travel, I won't even consider it." Allowing visa-free entry equals collecting personal information. I've never considered putting China on my travel list, and neither have the people around me. China is not a place you can go. We've already seen our companies being squeezed dry and then forced out. Aosi's video sparked heated discussions in Chinese-speaking communities. As expected, mainland Chinese netizens were highly displeased, viewing it as evidence of foreign forces harboring ill intent towards China. Overseas Chinese netizens, however, were much more rational, agreeing that many of the issues Aosi mentioned were true, most notably the difficulties with hotels and online payments. A netizen named Luna replied, "How is this surprising? Even metro station signs were once switched to pinyin, and I was stunned when I had to enter my ID number just to buy a metro ticket. Do you think this kind of environment is friendly to foreigners? Don't even get me started on the payment system. It's so closed off. When I returned to China, I couldn't use WeChat Pay for anything, whether transferring money or receiving red envelopes, without using a Chinese bank card and phone number. I could only use a family member's bank card, which has a 5,000 yuan monthly limit, not even enough to cover basic expenses. Thankfully, international chain stores and hotels accept foreign credit cards. Alipay does accept Visa, but there's a 3% transaction fee." She added, "For a foreigner visiting for just 2 weeks, who would want to spend time dealing with all these payment issues? Spending money should be easy and enjoyable. Why would they choose to visit China when there are plenty of other places where they can simply swipe their cards and be happy? Sometimes I wonder, does China have something against money? Why don't they want to take money from global tourists?" Another anonymous netizen commented that the main reason foreigners don't want to visit China is simply because it's extremely inconvenient. 1. Most mainstream international apps are blocked in China. Foreigners coming to China can't use apps like WhatsApp to message their families or Instagram to post photos. Many don't even know how to bypass the Great Firewall, leaving them completely disconnected from their usual digital life. 2. Cashless and cardless payment systems. China's QR code payment system may be ahead of the curve globally, but foreign bank cards and payment systems are useless in China. Foreigners are still accustomed to using cash or cards. Using apps like WeChat Pay or Alipay requires a Chinese phone number, but not all places allow foreigners to register for a Chinese phone number. Additionally, getting a Chinese bank account is incredibly difficult for foreigners, and the foreign banks that can be linked to these apps are very limited. Although Chinese law prohibits rejecting cash, many shops find excuses not to accept it. 3. Hotels refusing foreign guests. Many hotels do not accept foreign guests, as only those with special permits can accommodate them. This may not be an issue in large cities, but in smaller cities, finding a hotel with a necessary permit is nearly impossible. What are visitors supposed to do? Sleep on the streets? Any of these issues could easily deter foreigners from traveling to China. After all, they're spending money. Why not spend it somewhere else, hassle-free? Why choose a destination that causes frustration during a vacation? Oorn, a Thai national, deeply relates to these challenges. She owns businesses in both Thailand and China and has frequently traveled to China over the past decade for work, building relationships with numerous Chinese clients and friends. As someone familiar with China, she told China Observer that while foreigners are naturally curious about China, living in China as a foreigner can be highly inconvenient. As a business owner, Oorn acknowledged that China used to be full of opportunities and vitality, but that was before the pandemic. Afterward, consumer spending in China downgraded significantly, and purchasing power plummeted. Oorn and her stakeholders felt immense pressure as sales of their Thai specialty products dropped sharply. E-commerce and personal shopping sales were essentially halved. Compounding this, many of her Chinese employees fell ill with suspected flu-like symptoms. This reminded her of China's strict lockdown measures during the pandemic, leading her to worry about unpredictability in China. Eventually, she closed her company and returned to Thailand. Oorn said that life in China is very different from that in Thailand. The intense competition and pressure that everyone feels in China starkly contrasts with a more laid-back Thai lifestyle. Concerned about her Chinese employees' safety, Oorn requested that her interview video not be broadcast. She noted that she had studied in China and had many foreign classmates, but no foreigner would enjoy living in such a high-pressure environment. Oorn also noted that some Chinese people are self-centered and profit at the expense of others, which she attributed to the lack of widespread religious beliefs among Chinese. Many foreigners doing business with Chinese counterparts often end up at a disadvantage, which she sees as an inevitable result of cultural differences, a culture shock, as she puts it. She also encountered practical difficulties. Oorn couldn't use WeChat Pay without linking an employee's ID and bank account. To book a rideshare, she had to rely on an employee's personal information. Additionally, while in China, she avoided managing her Thai business remotely because she worried that using a VPN might get her into trouble. On one occasion, a shop she co-owned with a Chinese partner was temporarily shut down after someone reported her for illegal employment. Her partner quickly decided to close the store permanently, explaining that the accuser was a competitor jealous of their successful Thai-owned business. With China's economy currently in decline, inbound tourism has become a key strategy for Beijing's economic recovery. Since 1998, Chinese authorities have identified tourism as a new growth driver for the economy, rather than a merely diplomatic endeavor. Attracting international tourists means bolstering service sector exports. According to Statista, the total contribution of tourism to China's GDP from 2014 to 2022 rose from 9.4% to 11.6% before dropping to 3.3%. Political commentator Cai Shen-kun told Radio Free Asia, China's total retail consumption has remained stagnant for years. Although the Chinese government has introduced many policies, such as large-scale subsidies for home appliances and electric vehicles, the economic impact has been negligible. Under such circumstances, the government now hopes to revive the economy by extending transit visa exemptions and implementing other adjustments. Meanwhile, American economist Davy J. Huang pointed out that while tourists from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Russia are increasing, the number of visitors from Europe and North America is decreasing. He noted that European and American tourists tend to spend at a mid to high level, likely contributing no less than 3% to China's GDP. He stated that the decline in the number of European and American visitors to China will undoubtedly have negative implications for China's economy. It also suggests reduced appeal in international markets, limited potential for developing the international tourism industry, and setbacks in promoting China's global image. This is not just a reflection of Beijing's isolation, but could create a sense of growing distance between the Chinese people and the rest of the world. He said, countries with well-developed tourism industries, such as Japan and France, tend to have much greater influence globally. For example, Japan's cultural influence on Southeast Asia is significant. In the past, when China's tourism sector thrived, it had a substantial fan base worldwide. However, such a situation is increasingly hard to sustain today. As for whether relaxing visa-free entry could promote Sino-foreign business exchanges, Ding Hongbin, Associate Dean of Loyola University's Maryland Business School, expressed skepticism. He remarked, While the relaxed policy claims to facilitate business people greatly, it's unlikely to have a major impact on investments. For foreign visitors traveling to China, 5 days is usually sufficient. The real determinant for investments is business environment. The current investment climate has not noticeably improved compared to before. Many manufacturing companies are still considering decoupling and leaving China. Therefore, using this policy to attract foreign investments seems unlikely to yield significant results. Economist Davey Huang further argued that in the context of heightened tensions between China and the West, and under the current international media narrative, Western tourists are unlikely to develop a positive impression of China simply because of the visa-free policy. From a short-term perspective, Huang stated, the number of tourists this measure could attract would be limited. He concluded, if China truly wishes to attract more foreign tourists or professionals, it must go beyond visa-free policies. It needs to improve internet freedom, offer more internationally compatible payment options, and create a friendly, multilingual living environment. Most importantly, extreme nationalist behaviors in some regions and incidents of violence against foreigners could make visitors feel unsafe. China needs to tone down its nationalist rhetoric and avoid making foreigners feel that their activities in China are under threat.